Of course, some people may ask, why use a video game to critique objectivism? Well, first, let's be honest. The game was in production long before objectivism became a part of the story. The developers meant to develop a fun and challenging game first and foremost, with the details of the story coming in second. This has led some people to critique Bioshock's authenticity as a philosophical literary piece of art. What these critics don't understand is that all art and all works of literature and philosophy aren't born into the world fully formed. An author may begin writing a story with one purpose in mind, only to find out that the finished product says something much greater and deeper, just as Mark Twain's Huck Finn turned from a boy's adventure into an examination of what makes us human and Huck's morality. Star Wars made a similar journey of change. Bioshock went into production one way and came out very different with a complete message. As to critics who say it would have been better served as a book, I would ask them, what better medium exists for this story than a video game? If objectivism is bound up in the ideas of pursuing your own hopes and dreams to better yourself, then video games with their goal-oriented structures, power-ups, and economy systems make perfect sense as the ideal medium. Furthermore, video games are a powerfully persuasive medium largely due to how they pull a player into the world and make the outcomes dependent upon their own actions, just as Bioshock encourages players to choose how they want to level up and what powers, weapons, and playstyles to use. It should be noted, however, that Bioshock's critique is not perfect. As we just mentioned, a game's strength is its ability to pull a player into its world, but technical limitations can just as easily knock a player back out of it. While glitches are relatively rare, the occasional unloaded texture, particularly those on corpses, can jolt a player out of his immersion in the environment. Furthermore, elements of the gameplay itself runs counter to Bioshock's thesis. The game may encourage the player to use whichever powers and weapons they wish, but the progression of the game ultimately leads the player to choosing one of two basic skill sets, the close melee combatant and the distance warrior, making the player's choice almost meaningless. Furthermore, observant players may notice that the amount of Adam they receive by saving the Little Sisters and receiving gifts from Tenenbaum actually add up to more than the amount of Adam they receive by harvesting them. This being the case, some players would save the Little Sisters not out of the goodness of their hearts, but rather out of objectivist self-interest, thereby destroying the power of the choice. Furthermore, the main character spends a large portion of the game doing everything he can for Atlas, and look how well that turned out. And finally, if Bioshock was a complete debunking of objectivist thought, then why does the main character participate in the same cycle of pursuing his own goals and obtaining power and wealth? In an interview with the game website IGN.com, Ken Levine talked briefly about the philosophy in the game and had this to say concerning his critique. What happens when you take an idea to the extreme? And that's what I think Bioshock is about. It's about an ideology, an ultra-capitalist vision. And listen, I'm capitalist. I run a video game company. I'm not exactly running a commune over here. But whenever you take any notion to an extreme, what can happen? And what are the dangers of that? As seen in this interview, Bioshock doesn't attempt a complete debunking of all objectivism. The fact that the player builds up his own strength through capitalistic means says that some elements of objectivism are necessary. Individualism and self-interest are not inherently evil, but as Bioshock demonstrates, neither is altruism, some collectivity, and concern for others. Bioshock condemns extremism. All forms of altruism that are negatively portrayed in Bioshock are examples of forced altruism. Atlas uses the key phrase, "would you kindly," to control Jack, and the relationship between the Big Daddies and the Little Sisters is one of pheromones. But in the end, the player's moral choice to save or destroy is judged. Altruism is still hailed when it is honest, and individuality is condemned when it tramples over others. Bioshock critiques objectivism, yes, but doesn't completely write it off. Instead, Bioshock critiques extremist objectivism and extreme idealism in general. Rather than present an alternative ideal, Bioshock was meant to express how human nature makes pure ideals unrealistic. If anything, Bioshock suggests that human connections, however flawed, are the only worthwhile ideals in this world. When thinking philosophically, consider your ideals, would you kindly?